I often have conversations in my head with the little people that are real people, but in my head they're not real, which is what I'm going to be talking about. No, not at all. One of these conversations is, in fact, one that I've had over and over again. It is one where one of my friends or someone, whoever, is saying, "Oh, yeah, you often think and associate random things with numbers, and you associate everything with a number, and to you, these are always justified, but in real life, they make no sense." And so then they go on to ask me, "What do you associate this with?" And I give them a number. And then, "What do you associate this with?" And I give them a number. And then one of the times they ask me, "What do you associate the album Twin Fantasy by Car Seat Headrest with?" And I, of course, say the number 2. But then, to prove that I am not weird, I have to justify and say, this is not something I have invented, of course. The number 2 in the album Twin Fantasy is not something that came from me. It is something that came from Will Toledo. He inserted the number 2 into his art purposefully. It is something he decided. It was by pure literature, something that he decided to do. And I'm going to explain why. In fact, there are many, many reasons, and I'm going to start with the most glaring fact, that the title is, in fact, called Twin Fantasy, and of course, a twin implies 2. It is when a parent gives birth, and there is 2 children that come out instead of 1. They're not children yet, they're babies. But, essentially, yeah, 2 instead of 1, which is another theme, to have the 2 instead of 1. But, otherwise, the other glaring fact to anyone that knows a tiny bit about Car Seat Headrest is that this album was released twice. Once in 2011, once in 2018, and there are slight changes between the albums. So the fact that there are 2 albums with the same name that are dubbed differently, like one is Mirror to Mirror, the other is Face to Face. The fact that there are literally 2 albums of the same name and of the same, essentially the same, well, of course, that is another 2 in 1, right? Well, that one is a bit of a 1 and 2 when you think about it, but you could switch it around if you want. Thoughts don't have to be coherent. Otherwise, if you look at the album cover, there are 2 dogs that are attached. Of course, they cannot be separated. They are 2, but 1. I was not trying to say how they're 2 and 1. I'm literally just trying to insist on the number 2. So I don't know what, but I guess repetition always implies 1 repetition making something 2. So I'm going to talk about the repetition. In lyrics, there are oftentimes lyrics that are repeated, changed a tiny bit, right? So I guess the pair is of 1, but there are 2 things in the pair. So I guess that is the 2 and 1 that I am referring to, which by definition of a pair, I guess, whatever. There are many pairs, is what I'm trying to say. And one of these pairs in lyrics is, of course, the ocean washed over your grave, the ocean washed open your grave, which is in 2 songs, Beach Life and Death and Famous Prophets. Pause, opening a parenthesis, this might not be in both versions of the album. I am not an expert, and I don't have a sonographic memory, but people keep on sending me notifications. I need my coworkers to shut up. It is a Sunday night. Otherwise, there is other lyrics, such as in the song Stop Smoking, he says, "Stop smoking, I love you," and no, "Stop smoking, we love you, and we don't want you to die." And then in High to Death, he says, "Keep smoking, I'll still love you, but I don't want to die." Right. So there's a slight change, but of course these lyrics are meant to pair up together, right? And of course, anyone that's written anything, right, any pure literature fan, of course, knows the concept of repetition and how repetition is one of the strongest things you could do. It's easy to, and how you insert any kind of repetition and the brain remembers. The brain is like, I have heard this before, if you do it well, obviously, and it's very easy to do it well, so of course. So just by repeating something a couple, like, from the beginning to the end, and you'll be like, whoa! So I guess Will Toledo did that in a sense. Another glaring fact on how this album comes in 2s is just the fact that it talks about a relationship between 2 people. This relationship, if it was romantic or not, it was still a relationship between two people. Otherwise, there is also the fact that the other word in the title, of course, there's twin, which we discussed, and then there's the word fantasy, which a fantasy, of course, requires the existence of what is real and what is not. Another theme of the storyline of the album, I mean, and a lot of people always insist on other themes, but this is the only theme that I care about in this. This is the only reason I don't care that they were in a relationship or not. I don't care. I only want what is real and what is fake. That is the only thing that is important to me personally. But what was I trying to say? Oh yeah, so I don't know if I explained that well enough, that a fantasy requires two things to exist. What is real, of course, because if reality is not real, then if reality does not exist, then there is no person to create a fantasy. If fiction does not exist, then there is no fantasy, right? Right, by definition. So a fantasy evokes it brings up the concept of to a pair of reality fiction. And this pair of reality fiction is brought up again other points in the songs, one of which being Beach Life and Death. In the most hitting parts of the song, he mentions I am almost completely soulless, I'm incapable of being human, and that's not the part I want to talk about. He says, I don't want to go insane, I don't want to have schizophrenia. And this part of the song is very much a call to, he doesn't want this fantasy to become too real to him, too real, T-O-O, because if this fantasy is too real, then he is in his mind insane. And of course, this was written in 2011. Insanity wasn't cool then. Otherwise, moving on from this reality fiction thing, in one point I forgot to mention, the songs where lyrics complete each other are songs that go together, right? So Stop Smoking and High to Death both have the concept of a drug, one kind or another, and of love. Of course, the whole album is about love, so I don't know why I brought that up. And in Beach Life and Death and Famous Prophets, where they have the lyric of the ocean washed over your grave, the ocean washed open your grave, that those are both songs that are very, like, they're both the two longest songs on the album, right? 11 minutes and 13 minutes, not respectively, the opposite of respectively. And they're both, I had a friend describe them as epics. Like epics, not as MLG epic, like sunglasses, but epics as the sword. You're like, that was part of my fencing routine that I never did because I didn't pass my level. I quit after that. But what was I gonna say? But essentially, yeah, epics, and these two songs are in pairs. Well, the four songs are respectively in pairs. Another thing I wanted to bring up was in Nervous, Young, and Human. He brings up the concept of there's no angel on one shoulder and devil on the other. They're just two normal people. The two normal people being him and the person with whom he is in a relationship with. But of course, this angel and demon are also a pair that comes together. I don't know why I said pair. This pair that comes together, which is another twoo. Another time is when he brings up the concept of an inhuman, human, that sort of dichotomy. He, of course, I just mentioned the song Nervous, Young, and Human. There's also the song, like, in Beach Life and Death, of course, this is everyone's favorite song. Not everyone's favorite, but the one everyone, anyways. Everyone has a sort of obsession. And this sort of nervous, young, he says, I am almost completely soulless. I am incapable of being human. I am incapable of being inhuman. I am living uncontrollably. The sort of living uncontrollably, again, goes back to the sort of going insane, schizophrenia kind of idea. But the human inhuman is also a pair. But then the thought of living between that it is a dichotomy, and you have to be one or the other by definition, but you are neither. And it is not a sort of third gender kind of thing. It is like a sort of, why did I bring that up? Fuck. but it is a sort of contradiction of definition itself, contradiction of reality itself. And to exist outside of reality is to bring up a duality in and of itself. To exist in fiction, but to bring up the concept to exist in what is unreal is to exist. Is to for unreal to exist, there has to be a real to exist. So, there you go. Otherwise, I there was something I had to bring up. Oh yeah, the sort of wait. I want gravity to stop for me. My soul yearns for a fugitive from the laws of nature. That again is for the unreal. He yearns for the unreal. This fantasy of his. Otherwise, there is in Nervous Young and Humans mirror to mirror version, the monologue in that song, because of course in the 2018 version he changes the monologue, but he says early in the song, I use the term galvanistic, which is the obsolete scientific galvanism, which is the obsolete scientific theory. I'm not quoting it word for word. I don't know it by heart. Scientific theory of sort of energy, electricity going through our veins. That was our life force, and he came across this term in the story in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and in this novel, this novel is an exploration of the theme of creating a person, an idea, and he used that word galvanistic as a sort of something to represent how he created who this album is about. He created them as a person, and the idea of creating a real person, like this person already exists, but he created them, right? He had to have met them before creating them, and he still created them, right? They did not exist before he created them, but they had to have existed for him to meet them and to then create them, right? So there this contradiction, and contradiction again brings up what is real and what is not. Not that sense, because then I'm saying that contradiction is inherently false. That two real things cannot. No, that's not what I'm trying to bring up. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that two contradicting statements, yes, of course, they can be real at the same time. Obviously, everyone knows that, fuck. But what I'm saying is two vastly, like, God exists and God does not exist. Those are both true statements. And not because we should respect everyone's beliefs, just because objectively they are true. Otherwise, what was I trying to say? Concept of an inhuman. Oh, there's another one. The last point I'm trying to bring up is, of course, how the first album. So the first album he had put it out and said this is just twin fantasy, and then in 2018 he said new version, and this new version is called Face to Face version. So it's also twin fantasy, but in parentheses face to face. And then the first version, he renamed it, he dubbed it mirror to mirror. I don't know if I said this already, because I've been refilming it over and over again. And essentially, he's, this of course, a mirror to mirror implies, well, not only that, so basically what he means by mirror to mirror, of course, I'm not going to get into what this album means, because that doesn't fucking matter. I'm not here for that, what it means, fuck. But the mirror, is a concept of, well, a mirror, obviously, there has to be, there is a creation of what is real and what is fake on the other side of the mirror. But then to have two mirrors next to each other is sort of infinity, but an infinity that does not exist, right? Again, what is unreal. And then in face-to-face interaction, it is a face-to-face, he's finally ready to meet with Kate, the album is about Kate, face-to-face, and of course, that requires two people, again. This is 14 minutes, longer than the longest song in that album, which, anyways. Otherwise, what was I trying to say? One last thing to say, again, which was that, I forgot. I had this one last point to make, and I forgot it. I said that was going to be last, but while saying it, I had thought of something else. Oh well. Well, fuck. Now that I remembered, I only remembered one thing I had to say. There's another thing I had to add. But, it's gonna take an eternity to export. So that's cool. I didn't want to edit it, but essentially, I forget which version is which, but one of the versions is very focused on the Old Testament. The other is very focused on the New Testament. There are Bible quotes throughout both versions. There are also references, and there you go. So that's another duality. Okay, I remembered. But essentially, at the end of Famous Prophets, face-to-face version, so the new version, he changes the lyric of and now these three remain. Not the lyric, the quote from the Bible. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known, and now these three remain. He changes that, and now these two remain. So he really again insisted on the number two.